Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. Today, on Races of the Worlds, we're going to talk about something that a lot of people have asked me. Okay, and it all ties into the same concept. But people keep asking me, do off-worlders, do aliens believe in some sort of a god or higher entity? And the answer to that is definitively yes. Every race has, pretty much every race believes in some god or some higher entity. Now, I've got a list here. I'm just going to run through them. The reality is, for me, I've heard a lot of different names, but something that you got to understand is it's going to be impossible, essentially, or extremely ineffective, to utilize the name that everybody likes. Okay, because not everybody calls what you call God, whether it's God or by some other name. Okay, there are so many religions on earth alone that it would be impossible to make everybody happy. This being said, there is one primary reason why I tend to use the term God. Okay, do I believe wholeheartedly in God, in a higher entity? The answer is definitively yes. But even from a young age, I never saw the God that we know that we get taught in the church. I never saw it as the top of the totem pole. And it wasn't until I started looking into it that I understood why. But there is a saying that goes, God is known by many names on many planets. Or more to the point, the way it's put is, God is known by many names on many worlds. Now, I use the term God because, number one, it's short, it's real easy to remember, and with my memory, that's a good idea. But some of the other names that you may have heard, okay, some of these you'll recognize, some of them you won't. And with many of the off-worlders, and we know that the off-worlders are listening in, okay, some of these names will apply to them, some of them won't. You get to figure out which are which. Now, I'm not going to go through all the different religions on Earth. It's just not going to happen. Okay, so if you call your spiritual leader, if you call it by a name other than God, that's great. Okay, the list that I'm giving you is one that many of the off-worlders use. Things like Source, Universe, Gaia, God, Itza, the Great Drake, the Great Queen, Nataj, the Great Mother, the Prime Drop, the Prime Spark, the Great Pool, the Prime Originator, Source, and the Great Worm. Plus, of course, all the myriad religion leaders of whichever religion, such as Allah, Shiva, and I'm going to miss a whole pile of them. Okay, now before I try and get listing off a whole pile of other names, here's the thing to keep in mind: all of these gods, the actual gods themselves. Okay, yes, they give guidelines and tell you which way, they point you in the right direction. Okay, and the right direction, by the way, doesn't matter what religious belief you follow. Take a look at these three laws: be true to yourself, do unto others as you desire them to do unto you, and energy out, energy in, regardless of what your religion. Okay, even I know another one I just thought of would be Thunderbird. Okay, the ancient gods of Greece, etc. All of these, take a look at any of the belief structures you follow and ask yourself, with those three laws, those are karmic laws, and see if you find any of the laws that you have, that you follow, any of the commandments, any of the guidelines, whatever you call them, see if they don't all fit under one of those three laws. Now, those three laws are each equally important. And whether you happen to be an elemental, okay, which is where you get the prime drop, the great mother, and the prime spark from, okay, Okay, those are all elemental terms for gods. Okay, the prime originator is from way back. Okay, a lot of the reptilians follow either the great drake, the great worm, or Nataj. Okay, so there's a lot of different names, but they all point to the same idea: get along. Okay, especially at this point in time, most of the different races that I work with, that because they have unified planets, they tend to follow a simple god. Okay, they usually utilize one name, not always. Okay, so sorry about that. So when you're looking at the different gods and the different religions, they all believe pretty much in the corporeal life, and then after you pass away, there is a type of afterlife. Now, what I found is when you pass away, it doesn't matter what God you believe in, doesn't matter what race you are, doesn't matter what species you are, you all end up going to the same place anyway. Okay, now in my case, this is just simply the way I see it. This does not mean that I know everything. Lord knows I don't. But it is time to realize that regardless of the name you're using to worship whichever God you're following, okay, regardless of the name you're using, do your best to realize one thing. Not everybody sees the world in the same way. Not every religion is capable of reaching every person. And yet every person needs a direction. They do require some direction to explain the inexplicable, the junction point between religion and science. Religion explains the inexplicable until science can figure it out. Now understand, all of these names that I've given you, okay, all of these names I've relayed to you, many different religions and many different races follow them. For instance, like we said earlier, when you're dealing with the reptilians, the great drake, the great worm, or Nataj are common for them to follow. Okay, they are a common name. Now there are other minor names that are used as well, but they all point to the same thing. Treat each other, the race that you are, as well as the peoples that you come in contact with. Treat them as you desire them to treat you. Okay. Now, I know I've got terminology that is not going to agree with some of you, and something I should have mentioned. We do encourage you to, if you like our video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel to get the rest of the videos that are coming up. There's a lot of different areas, okay, that we try and bring out on a regular basis. And if you've got questions or you've got requests, absolutely look at the list below this video. It'll tell you a number of different ways of getting a hold of me. Okay. And I do my best to respond. Lord knows that's not always perfect, but, I do what I can. So the real message here is call your spiritual guide whatever you will. Okay. As I said earlier, well, that came out well. As I said earlier, God is known by many names on many worlds. Okay. Now, rest assured, when you start looking at some of the creatures around, some of the animals around, all of them, anything that has a spirit, which by the way is pretty much everything on the planet, everything you see has a spirit. Okay. Now, many will tell me that, many people have told me over the years, animals are just animals. Okay, they simply, they're simply an animal. When they die, that's it. They're here for food. Well, ironically, that's not entirely the case. Actually, that's not really all that ironic. The animals themselves also follow various different spiritual guides. Okay, this is not to say one is better than the next. This is simply to say that many people have many different names. Humans all still follow multiple different names for gods. Okay, and oftentimes, if you actually look at the commandments and you look at the guidelines that people that the different religions have, they basically say the same thing. Almost, and most of the time, it's almost a literal translation. Okay, now some of the races, by human standards, do go to rather heavy-duty extremes. Okay, and the human palate does not deal with a lot of it. But when you're dealing with these off-world races, do they believe in a higher entity? Absolutely. Some of them believe in one god, many believe in multiple gods, but still with one primary. Take a look at the ancient Greeks, the ancient the ancient Romans, and for that matter, the modern day so-called First Nations. Okay, they all have multiple gods with one primary god as a leader. Well, it's kind of like if you look at things like a company. Okay, you have one person that is the president. Okay, there is somebody else that is the general manager, and it works down into smaller and smaller areas. Each one of these people have some sort of strength or some sort of power over the ones below them. In the case of the gods, understand, and this is the hard one for most humans to run to deal with, gods by their nature do not require a worshiper. What they desire is respect, they desire emulation, but they do not. But you got to understand, they were here way before the corporeals were here. So, do they require that kind of energy for them to be able to create something? Well, if you think about all the stories you know about the gods over the years, whatever your religious following is, okay, all of these gods started before the planets were built. Okay, now if they started before the planets were built, they certainly didn't need human worshippers. Now, do not get me wrong. There is an extremely important reason to have the various religions. As I mentioned before, the reality behind it is not everybody sees the world the same way. The idea of a religious congregation is to have brotherhood, to have that support system. Okay, whatever you call it, whatever name you want to call it, the whole idea is the brotherhood, that support system. And even the off-worlders have their own religious rites. Some are more involved, some are much more lackadaisical. Okay, the important factor is that every one of these races, as far as I'm aware, actually, even with the Drakes, they actually believe there is somebody that is more advanced than they are, that has more insight than they do, and they turn to these gods, to these entities, okay, in order to get a better understanding of which direction they're going. This does not make any one of them the right one. I was asked one day about, if God had, if God were to pick a religion, which religion would he pick? And the reality behind it, as I told that individual, the reality that I came to understand was the way God works is he gives everybody a piece of the truth. Everybody, and then says, okay, now you've all got a piece of the truth. If you want the full truth, get along. Get along, talk to each other, and see which way things are going. Okay, see what fits. Now, this particular video is opening the door for me to go down another road altogether and just get into the other side of what I do. But, to start with, this particular video is because, having been asked so often about the spirituality of the off-worlds, okay, most of them believe in the list of names I gave you at the beginning. Okay, most of them believe in them by one name or another. There are a few extra names I have left out of the equation. Okay, and I'm just not going to go down that road. It opens too many cans of worms, and there are too many minor names that are used. There's a lot of people that will claim that they are following one particular path. Okay, now understand, if you're following a religious leader, a religious figurehead, a god of whatever name, okay, gods are creators, they are not destroyers. Okay, now don't get me wrong, they have the capacity to do both, but you have to have the positive and the negative in order to have a choice of which way you want to go. Now, the Offworlders, as I mentioned on many shows in the past, because you can find me speaking of the Offworlders and the ancient races on Spaced Out Radio, the first Friday of every month. Okay, I've been there for about 5.5 years now. I think March will make the end of my 6th year, or the start of it, I'm not sure which. I've been there for a while. But that is a Spaced Out Radio is an internet station that I work on. They have a lot of terrestrial outlets and what have you, but drop in and listen to us. Okay, lots of great shows on that station. And of course, as per usual, I do stumble over things, so I got over it pretty quick. Okay, this is a live recording, meaning when I get finished it, I do not go back and edit any of it. What you see is what you get, except you can't have my coffee. Okay, but the spirituality factor of life, okay, is in order to reach out and attain that level. It's not a question of evolving into something more, it is simply a question of getting in touch with who you are, with remembering you. Okay, and remembering that critical factor, do unto others as you desire them to do unto you. Now, it was said once, and I'm pretty certain that most of you will actually understand it, or will actually have recognized it, but it was said by a gentleman one day, let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. Okay, now I asked somebody one day about an issue because they were complaining about somebody's haircut. Okay, and the reason the complaint was made was because of the fact that it was not as God wanted it. Well, understand, if your God created everything, He created all options. He or she, she or it, take your pick. Okay, it applies to all of them. Okay, but they created everything to give you that freedom to choose what you desire. And when the person made the comment, I looked at them and went, tell me, are you upset by the haircut, by the hairstyle, because that person has the courage to wear it, or because you don't? Okay. I also I've dealt with people that take a look at somebody from a different religion and go, that person is wrong. Well, if that person is treating people as they desire to be treated, or better yet, as you would like them to be treated, if they're treating them the same way, does it matter what name they actually put on it? Okay, many people refer to Mother Earth as Gaia. Okay, I came to understand her name by what she told me was her name is Itzah. Okay, you may know her as Mother Earth, and I do not know all the different names that go with it. Sorry, we just gotta work with it. So if I haven't mentioned the name that you use, hope you'll forgive me, because, well, frankly, I don't know all of them, and I don't have enough time in my life to list off all the variations. Okay, But this is the time, and now, especially with everything we've gone through recently, like over the course of the last year here, now is the time to really take a look at the people around you. And if they're treating you decently, do your best not to worry about whether they're calling God what you call them, or whether they're calling it something else. What matters is how they treat each other. Okay, people are so worried, seem to be in many cases so worried about what happens after you die that they forget to really take advantage and really enjoy the bounty of what happens while you're alive. Now, I've been on some worlds, like for instance, if we take a look at some of them, you know, many religions have a definitive dietary requirement or limitation. You can do this or you can't do that. And you have to understand, if it exists, if it saves lives, the odds are it was put there to save lives. Now, you can go with the idea that I've heard many races go, we developed this, we designed it. You know, God created everything, but we made this. Well, you kind of can't have, in my opinion, you can't really have both. Either God created everything, or the potential for everything, or he didn't. And if he did, then he created the good, the bad, and the ugly, as well as the beautiful. Okay, everything that is there is usable. Okay, virtually every religion that I've heard of has a place they call heaven, or that emulates heaven or hell, or they've got a place that emulates Eden. Okay, these are all throughout all of the different religions. Okay, even this funny little thing about the winter celebration and many of the solstice celebrations, they take place on other planets as well by different names. Okay, all of these are all different names all meshed together. Now, if this sounds like everything's a bit lumped together, it is, because all of these gods, all these, how do I put this? Any entity that I've heard of by any name is credited with creating everything. Now, I like the way William Shakespeare put it when he said, and I'm hoping I'm quoting this right, when he said, "A rose by any name would smell as sweet." Okay, well, a god by any name is still going to do the same thing. You can call your car a bicycle if you want, but the reality is it still does the same thing a car does. If you're wearing a shirt, you may call it a shirt, you may call it a tunic, you may have a different name for it, but it's still a covering for the upper part of your body. Okay, so don't get so hung up on what the name is. Okay, all of these different religions follow the same line. Okay, the primary one, and this is the only one that I really focus on at home anymore, is the three laws. Be true to yourself, do unto others as you desire them to do unto you, and energy out, energy in. Okay, now the reason I only focus on those is because if you look at the different laws, the different commandments, if you will, they all fit into those three from everything that I've come across. Okay, it was once said that the most creative thing anybody ever did was take a simple concept and complicate it. Well, if you take three laws and you expand it into 10, 12, 20, 450, it doesn't matter. What you're doing is complicating a simple concept. Okay, and this is why, like, I've been accused of being prejudiced against people, and I'm really not. The fact of the matter is, I literally see all peoples the same way. They have different colors, they have different personalities, but if they're treating me decently, I'll treat them decently. In all fairness, I do my best to start off treating people right, simply because it doesn't guarantee I'll get treated properly. but it does stack the deck in my favor. Okay, same as for you. So, I'm going to wrap this up here, but where it comes to the different gods of the universe, of the cosmos, of the multiple races, understand they all essentially mean the same thing. They are a different name for the same person. If you will, it's kind of along the same lines as child, brother, sister, depending on which gender, you know, aunt, husband, wife. You get the idea. All of these may, you get husband, uncle, son, brother, father. All of these are names for the same person. Same applies to God, the great drake, Natash, the great worm, the great pool. These are all names for the same entity. Okay, just taking on various forms. And understand, gods have the ability to modify the way they look. Okay, and virtually every religion I know of, the basic backbone of it is our God created us in their image. Okay, and we will get to that another day. Like I said, this is opening the door for something else entirely, but for a new venue for me. So with that in mind, okay, I'm going to bring this to a close. Otherwise, I'm going to go around in circles. And again, give us a thumbs up if you like us. If you like the video, subscribe to our channel so you can go back and get the rest of the videos and see the new ones coming up. And if you check down below the video, you'll find a whole pile of different ways of contacting me. Feel free to use any one of them. Okay? Until then, and until we meet again, take care of yourselves and each other, and for pity's sakes, stay positive.